Welcome back to the UNC Tar Heels football recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting, Miss Deana King. And by the way, you can head on over to our site and get all of Deana's expertise on the board. So much of her work is premium. So much of our work is premium. Our observations and inside information on the football and basketball heels, plus basketball recruiting with the great David Sisk. It's just $8.33 a month, guys. And right now, being the holiday season, it's not too late. You can give a THI subscription as a gift. It's a wonderful deal. It's a wonderful opportunity to give a Tar Heel fan you love an opportunity to get inside information 365 days a year. And Deana, we're going to take a look at the class of 2023 targets for North Carolina. The class of 22 signed a week ago, number 9 class in the country. Right now in the class of 2023, we think it's going to be bigger than the 17 kids Carolina signed for 22. They do have one commitment in the books. That is from 3-star quarterback Tad Hudson. We'll talk about him and the rest of the kids here as we dive into the offensive targets here in this podcast for UNC. So, Deana, let's go ahead and talk about Tad. You know Tad pretty well. You've followed him for a while. We've seen him around Chapel Hill. We saw him at the Showtime camp back in June. Looked pretty good. He's got a nice arm. Big kid. He looks like he can play a couple positions on a football field. He committed in late July. I think it was maybe the last day of July. I think he committed late on a Sunday night. It took him a while to get the edits ready to tweet out, and he finally did, and he went ahead and popped for the Tar Heels, and you kept texting me saying, he's almost ready, and he finally was. And to get your first commit in the class being a quarterback, I think is a pretty good deal for the Tar Heels. So what are your thoughts about Tad Hudson and the season he just had at Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina?
Yeah, it seems like forever. I mean, last year at this time, North Carolina had 2 commits already, and Tyshawn Chapman and Tayon Holloway, and they only have 1 now. So I think it's kind of a little bit behind schedule. But, yeah, I've seen Tad in person a couple of times, like you said, at the Showtime camp, and then saw him in state playoffs against Chambers. The only game they lost, he had kind of a rough game. He did throw 2 touchdowns, but Chambers, as everyone knows, they've got a great football team down in Charlotte. They lost to Cardinal Gibbons in the state championship in a monsoon, basically, in Raleigh a few weeks ago. But Hudson's a big kid, like you said, can make all the throws, and just had a really good year. I know there's been some questions about his stats, like his completion percentage, but I kind of wouldn't look too much into that because, I mean, when you look at it, you're throwing the ball, you may not have the big time targets like everybody else, but Huff has a lot of good ball players, but it just several factors can be in that lower passing completion percentage. You'd like to see it, in the 60s at least, but this year Connor Herrell almost completed 70%. So it's something that Tad can work on, and I'm sure with Coach Longo, kind of we've seen this staff. They've always gave their commits tidbits and hints and some advice on how to get that up. So, but he's a big kid. He, like you said, the quarterback's usually the centerpiece of basically the team. He should be the leader. So it'll be interesting to find out who all Tad is helping to recruit. And the next time I speak to him, I'll be more out to ask him that.
6'3", 221 pounds. He's the number 17 prospect in the state of North Carolina. A little bit low, what people might think when they're think about the kind of quarterbacks this staff has brought in. But I think we also understand that when these guys see what they want, they go for it. They don't care about star rankings. So fans shouldn't either. I think so far, 3 years in, People can trust the evaluation of the staff. What we're going to do for the rest of the offense for the class of 23, this is kind of the main guys that they're focusing on right now, and some guys that Deana wanted to illustrate and kind of have stand out in the class. And we're going to learn as we maybe move into the spring more exactly about how we think the class will shape up, Deana. We do think it's going to be bigger than the 17 members in 2022. And before we get into some of the other offensive players, why do you think the class will be bigger? And do you think it'll be a little bit heavier on offense or defense, or just kind of split maybe?
Recently, it's been basically split, but yeah, I believe they will go in the 20 range this next class, because they've been kind of low, and that's the $1 million question that me and you get asked all the time on the boards. Why is Carolina not taking more than X amount? Well, Mac tells us in the press conference, we're not hiding anything. He's just saying roster management. And we've heard roster management so many times from Coach Brown about this. And it's not a simple process, because now with the transfer portal and kids getting extra COVID years, it's a lot more than it used to be, where you could say, oh, well, we'll sign 26 this year and 25 the next year and 28 the next year. It's a lot different type of football recruiting now.
Well, to stay on that very quickly, think about what we've learned just in the last couple of weeks. People said, boy, only 7. Originally, we thought it was going to be around 14, because that's what the staff thought it was going to be. Crept up to 17 when Will Hardy went ahead and popped a couple of days before signing day. But Kieran Johnson's coming back. He's using that NCAA extra year. Brian Anderson's doing that. They just got a British Brooks is also doing that. And they just got to transfer in from Miami, another offensive lineman. So that's 4 spots right there that maybe 5 years ago they would have used on high school kids. But they're using those spots for next year on guys that are all 22 and 22 years old, and will be 23 years old next season, or at least Gaynor is 21 and he'll be 22. So college football teams are in some ways staying older, getting older at certain spots based on some of these kids using that last year. And this is going to go on for a few more years. If you redshirted and didn't even get on the field in the 2020 season, in a few years from now, you could say, hey, I want to use that extra year, and you could still use it. So the roster management crunch is going to be a problem for the next several years in college football. Okay, let's dive into some of these 2023 kids. One guy you and I have been talking about for a while, you've seen him in person at some camps, and obviously he's somebody that everybody in the country wants. That's Noah Rogers. He's a 4-star wide receiver from Rollsville High School, right down the road from me here in Rollsville, North Carolina. 6'3", 185 pounds, the number 64 prospect nationally, number 9 in his position, and the top rated prospect in the state of North Carolina for the class of 2023. Why do you like Noah Rogers so much, and why do you think the staff likes him so much? It's an easy question.
He was kind of unknown until the spring football season, and he exploded. He helped Roseville to a state championship runner-up finish, and he his catches, receptions, he was making just remarkable plays. And then when that was over, they jumped right into that 7-on-7 play, and he played with the Carolina Stars. And anybody that follows Carolina recruiting know that a lot of Carolina recruits play for the Carolina Stars. Anthony Boone, the former Duke quarterback, he's the coach there. Drake played there. Gavin Blackwell, Rah played. I could just name them all. Sam has a really good relationship with Anthony Boone. So I saw him play down there, and it was no difference than the spring football season, making play after play. He was just so much, I would say, more polished than everybody else. I'm like, wow, where did this kid come from? And he continued, had a great junior year, blew up with the rankings. I mean, I think he was one of the top kids that moved into the really, really high. I mean,
he was one of the big climbers in the class.
Yeah, he was behind, I believe, Christian Hamilton for the number one player in the state. Now he is considered the number one player. That's coming off being seen in camps and combines and his play. I mean, his offer list is impressive, but his brother is a walk-on at UNC, so he's been at Carolina. He knows what's going on at Carolina, and I mean, I think truly, he may have some national teams in there at the end, but I think this may come down to a Carolina NC State battle because he has a lot of tie-in at State too. He has a lot of friends over there, and like I said, his brother being at UNC. So, but him as a player, he's kind of like an Andre Green. He's a tall, lank, game-breaking receiver who he's got a little bit of the Bo Corrales in him and going up and getting the ball too and making some remarkable catches. So it's not hard to see why everybody in the country would want a Noah Rogers on their team.
You mentioned Christian Hamilton. We heard his name before. We heard Noah Rogers. We've actually heard about Christian Hamilton for a while. He's a 4-star wide receiver, little bit of a different player, 6 feet, 170 pounds from Harrisburg, North Carolina. He is the number 86 player nationally. So Rogers is 64. Hamilton is 86. He's the number 14 player nationally. His position number 2, right behind Noah Rogers in the state of North Carolina. You have raved about him to me when we've talked about 23 kids. So why don't you tell everybody else some of the things you've told me?
He's a big time player. Not as big as Noah, but extremely quick and fast, and could fit the Josh Downs role at UNC, a slot type guy. Athletic. I mean, he played a lot on defense this year. So, I mean, he's listed as a wide receiver, but he can play the secondary too. I mean, the scrimmage, the 7-on-7 that I saw all them play, he was playing a little linebacker. And I was like, wow, I think he had a injury that caused him not to play wide receivers, but he was trying to help his 7-on-7 team, and he was playing linebacker or a safety type position. So just athletic, and we've seen this as a common theme for Carolina. They're going to recruit kids that, like Max said, if things don't work out on one side of the ball, they can fall back on another position that they are just as good at. So,
or even
Christian
multiple
Hamilton
positions on the same
athlete.
side of the ball. Or even multiple positions on the same side of the ball.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's too early with some of these kids because they've been recruited for a while, and we've seen the trend go earlier and earlier with a lot of commits. Carolina had, like you said, by Christmas, Tayon Holloway committed on Christmas last year. That was their second commit. They got Malachi Hamrick, I think, in January last year, and they got another one. I'm drawing a blank right now in early February.
Travion Green.
Travion Green, yeah.
And kids, then Malachi.
And 2 years ago, they had like 5 or 6 by the end of February. So where do you think stand with Christian Hamilton? And is this a deal where Hamilton won't go where Rogers goes because they don't want to compete for, even though I think they're different receivers and different players, or can they coexist in the same place? And do they know they can coexist in the same place?
I think they're good compliments. They played on the 7-on-7. Now everybody, I guess it's just kind of, I told you about this kind of off the thing. It's kind of a wait and see, because right now, who's going to be the next quarterback after Sam Howell? Yeah. Drake, May, Jacoby. They may be going to wait and see how these guys adapt, because it'll be their first really meaningful snaps and everything. And this class may wait a little while. I'm not sure, Carolina with the 14 that we thought they were going to kind of push for some commitments early to save their spots and everything, but with a bigger possibly class, they can probably wait a little bit longer. But both of these players, Carolina's in their top list, but they're national recruits, so they're gonna take their time and enjoy their visits. I mean, with junior days coming up in January, I told you out of this list, let's see which kids off these lists come to these junior days, and we'll have a better idea where North Carolina stands with a lot of them.
Also, the Connor Herrell factor. We spoke with Phil Longo on Monday, and he raved about Connor Herrell, who's already in Chapel Hill getting in some workouts, pre-bowl workouts. He can't participate in any of the bowl activities. He can't go to Charlotte with the team. Bo Atkinson, by the way, defensive end from Raleigh, defensive end linebacker. They're calling him linebacker. He's also taking part. And there are a couple more kids they expected to show up as well. But, Connor Herrell was a valedictorian of his high school class. So I think he's in the mix as well. I mean, we've heard Drake May by a lot of people, but it's got to be done on the field. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting element to this as well. And we'll go on to some more kids here in a minute, but this is part of the discussion too, Deana. The sales pitch has been sort of a trajectory like this because the program had followed it. Most of the kids in the class of 22 committed before this season. And it wasn't like this was a total collapse season. It wasn't like they went 3-9. They went 6-6 with several narrow losses. And it's kind of an easy pitch for the staff to say, look, if we had a guy like you and a guy like him, we're probably winning those games down the road. So envision us not being 6-6 down the road. But that's why this 2022 football season is going to be important, because that's kind of where the rubber is going to meet the road with this program and its direction. They're going to have to win a lot of games on the field and do it in a way that impresses these kids. So you might be right. Maybe a lot of kids wait and they want to see if the message turns into a reality on the field.
Yeah. It's like kind of different from the class 2022. They, a lot of expectations heading into the year, and it was like a lot of, and everybody wanted to join in. So after finishing 6-6, you got to kind of, I think kids are just going to say, okay, let's see where this goes before. Yeah. I'm not saying that there's still not excitement, but because the staff did a tremendous job keeping those 17 guys. Well, 16, we won't count Hardy because he just committed and then signed 2 days later. But the other 16, other staffs were and fan bases were in their social media and trying to negative recruit, saying Carolina, 6-6, stuff like that. So to get these guys signed and not lose any decommits is a credit to the staff. So they're banking on this group, 21, to do the upward trend for this program. It's not going to be built overnight. And I think having guys in the program like Sam Howell and the guys they lost last year really kind of covered up some of the possible issues that came up this year. So it's a lot of young talent. It's just got to be molded together, and they're headed on the right track, I think.
Yeah. And with respect to Will Hardy, and I know this is an offense thing, and we'll get to these other kids, if they knew they were going to have more spots than they thought back in the spring, they probably would have pushed harder for him because they loved him for a long time. They liked him for a long time. Mac even noted last week, hey, we recruited him for 6 months. They liked him a lot for 6 months, but they weren't sure how many spots they had. So they had to be very, very economical, very judicious with the kids that they really pushed hard for. They had a very narrow net. It was hard getting recruiting stories on individual players because there weren't many of them out there that they were truly going after. That was a big challenge for us. I don't think that's going to be as much, Dean. I don't think that's going to be as much a challenge from this class. I think the net's going to be a little bit wider because they're going to have more spots to fill.
another kid that they really, really liked, but they couldn't offer him because until later in the process was Wesley Grimes, the wide receiver at Millbrook who signed with Wake Forest. I mean, they really liked him. But they went all in on Andre Green, and that worked for North Carolina, but it kind of worked against North Carolina on another receiver if they wanted, because it shows Green that they were totally committed to him. He was the one, kind of like they did with Travis Shaw. You're the one and only. You're the only offer.
Well, I mean, with respect to Wesley Grimes, Andre Green is pretty good pickup.
Yeah. And so when you got Andre Green, and then, they didn't know all the receivers that were going to be leaving. They kind of got into the Grimes sweepstake late in the game, and he had built such great relationships with Coach Clausen and his staff, so he eventually signed with them. But that might not be an issue this coming class, because like we said, more players, more spots, maybe a wider net. We've already seen a little bit of wider net for North Carolina in the 23s. Earlier this week, they started offering 25 kids, and I'm like, whoa, this is getting crazy.
Well, they offered some 24s this time, had a couple offered this time a year ago. So it's always kind of weird when they get into that next class. Paul Billups is a 3-star wide receiver in the class of 2023. He's 6'2", 186 pounds, from Chesapeake, Virginia, Western Branch High School, number 54 nationally at his position. He's a number 8 prospect in talent-rich Virginia, although I think Virginia was a little heavier in the top part of the class in 22 than it is in 23, but still, this kid's a fantastic talent. A 3-star kid, certainly with the potential ending up as a 4. And I'll throw in Chris Culver, the 3-star receiver from Maiden, North Carolina, 6'3", 180 pounds, number 68 nationally his position, the number 14 kid in North Carolina. We saw him at the Showtime camp. The staff spent a lot of time with him. They like him a lot. I think he's another kid that also plays multiple positions. So very quickly on Billups and Culver, what do you like about them, and what do you know about them with respect to Carolina?
Billups is a Virginia kid, Tidewater kid, and it's like a broken record. If a Tidewater kid lots the Tar Heels, the name Dre Bly is going to be in the lead recruiter position. And, he just was at the game day event by Coach Glover up there in Virginia Beach. And Billups is a great player. He's been to UNC several times. So, Carolina's going to be in the mix of that. And Culver comes from Maiden, a really good football program there. And we saw him at Showtime, got an offer at Showtime right after Showtime. I remember that. I remember him coming with Rico Walker, who will talk in the defensive podcast, and watching him and Rico mingle with Coach Brown and Miss Sally there at the end of the Showtime camp, where Mac was probably getting to know Culver a little bit better, and didn't take long for the Tar Heels to offer him. But he was one of the state leaders in receptions this year. He's got really good speed and hands, and he's going to be a top target for them. I think the wide receiver base guys that they're looking at are really good, and I believe that's one of the strengths of this, where Carolina's recruiting is in the wide receiver part.
Well, tight end is partial wide receiver, partial offensive line, partial fullback, all kinds of stuff. And pardon me if I get this name wrong. I should be better at this, but I'm going to do my best here. Andrew Raplea, a 4-star.
I don't know if you want me to do the Southern twang, Andrew Raplea.
Yeah, that
I
There
have
you
no
go.
clue.
I'm not a sweet tea drinker. I'm not a tea drinker at all, but damn it, if I don't feel like drinking sweet tea right now after hearing that, Deana. He's from Milton, Massachusetts. You don't find a lot of big time prospects coming from Milton or from anywhere, in Massachusetts in football anyway. 6'4", 215 pounds, and number 240 prospect nationally in the class. He's number 12 at his position. What do you know about him? Because I don't know that much, including how to pronounce his last name. I apologize to him. Next time we talk about him on a podcast, I will do better.
Well, I mean, I just looked at him, looked at his frame, and looked at some of his film, and I don't know. And him being up in Massachusetts, I don't know why Gronk popped in my mind. The tight end, rock. Being a big Patriot legend up there. So definitely not going to compare Andrew to Gronk, but right now. But he just kind of made me think of that when the first time when he posted about the Carolina offer. He posted on social media today that he was going to be contacting coaches and staffs that he feels that are in the best shape for him. We will have to see if North Carolina is in that group. He was being honest. He's like, I don't want to waste other staff's time in recruiting me. I think I know like a core group that I want to focus on. I know Coach Lilly is pretty big in his recruitment, being his tight end pedigree out in the college and the NFL game. So it'll be interesting to see if Andrew lists Carolina, I guess, in a top list, but they've got a solid chance because he's a good player up there.
We've got 6 offensive linemen to talk about. 4 of them are 4-star kids. 3 of them are 2-star, and 3-star, and they're both very intriguing kids who I could see at some point down the road. One of them becoming a 4, maybe even both. But when we'll hit on each of those guys individually, let's begin with Madden Sanker, a 6'4", 300-pounder from Douglasville, Georgia, which is where Brandon Robinson's from, by the way. The number 93 overall prospect nationally, number 4 at his position, and number 10 in the loaded state of Georgia. We've been hearing Madden Sanker's name a lot lately.
He's been on social media a lot, when Carolina was getting all these guys and recruiting all these guys, and, they were signing them, and he was on social media. I don't ever forget one of the tweets. He's like, what's going on up there in Chapel Hill, and Georgia's been really good to North Carolina. They're right in that blueprint for the recruiting. And, I think one of the reasons Georgia's been important here recently is Coach Lilly's ties in Georgia, being in Georgia and knowing a lot of the high school football coaches down there in that region. And so, but it's going to be hard. You're going right in a SEC country, and a kid that probably most likely is been following the Georgia Bulldogs a long time. So it's going to be interesting following his recruitment. I don't believe he's done a top list, but North Carolina's trying. And as when you got a group of kids that are very prolific on social media trying to recruit kids, they take notice. That, I mean, for him to make that tweet about what's going on up in UNC, I'm kind of paraphrasing, that wasn't his exact words.
Yeah.
But a national kid like that to say that, it was kind of interesting. So we'll be following Madden's recruitment real close.
Monroe Freiling was also at the Showtime camp. We got a chance to see him there. Really big kid. Looks like the kind of kid that, boy, when he gets to college and they get a couple of years working on that frame, he's just going to be massive. 6'7", 274. The last time that Rivals weighed him, I'm sure he's either that or a little bit higher now. From Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, which is in Charleston area, number 109 nationally, in the class of 23, number 9 at his position, number 1 in the state of South Carolina. And if you're noticing a trend here, we've got the kids we're talking about in these 2 podcasts, number 1 in Virginia, number 1 in North Carolina, number 1 in South Carolina, right in that footprint. So what do you know about Monroe Freiling?
Well, most people say, oh, he's a South Carolina kid. He's probably big Clemson or South Carolina fan, or, followed them, grew up wanting to be that. Monroe's from the West Coast, so he really don't have the loyalty to Clemson or South Carolina. I mean, he's playing. I talked to him earlier after the Showtime, and I believe he came up for a game
Yes.
this fall, and he really liked UNC. I know he's gonna have a lot of heavy hitters after him because he's really blew up, and we saw him in person going against some of the better defensive players in the Showtime camp. So it's going to be interesting to see him. It's just kind of weird to see a kid, just tell you honestly that that's not going to be a factor just because he's at Oceanside Academy down there in the Charleston area. So, I mean, he's probably open up to everybody. He's a national recruit.
Sullivan Absher is the kid that you talked to in the summertime. He wanted that Carolina offer. You wrote a piece about how he wanted the Carolina offer, and then he got the Carolina offer. He is also 6'7", 285 pounds, from South Point High School in Belmont, North Carolina. The number 248 overall player in the nation in the Rivals 250, number 22 at his position, number 6 in the Old North State. You've gotten to know him quite a bit. You talked to him a lot. It was interesting when he was so open about wanting that offer, and then he got the offer.
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid that basically was really not on anybody's radars. I mean, we talked about the class of 22, Justin Kanyek, not coming out of nowhere. Exactly. And just blowing up. And I believe that Sullivan is too. I mean, he only had in-state offers, I believe State and Duke, and then I think he went up and went on a visit, one of these unofficial, where they basically, if the schools are so close, they just try to hit Carolina in one part of the day, and they'll go to State and may go to Duke, and they try to get 2 or 3 visits in on a trip. And so he come back and he worked out. Coach Brown and staff, Coach Searles, liked what they saw, and they offered him, and he was happy. I believe he's gotten a lot more offers and attention after that. He came to a game. I believe he went to a game at Clemson as well. So, I mean, he's in that Charlotte metro based area that North Carolina wants to hold down. And so it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up going. Like I said, the junior days are going to be important. And so I expect him to be at one of them, because I expect Tar Heels to be one of his top schools.
Marquis Anderson, 4-star kid from Roebuck, South Carolina. Little South Carolina flavor here on this podcast. 6'3", 300 pounds, the number 15 player nationally at his position, the number 3 prospect in South Carolina. Interesting that 2 of the top 3 prospects in South Carolina are offensive linemen, and both of them Carolina is pursuing. What can you tell everybody about Marquis Anderson?
Yeah, he's been on their radar for a while. Dorman, they're a great football program down there in South Carolina. So whoever gets him is going to get a good one. He came up for a game. Talked to him a little bit. Kind of some of these guys, it was early in their recruiting process. I believe he also went to Clemson, and I'm sure he went to South Carolina, being a South Carolina kid. So just going to be really anxious to see what he does. I mean, North Carolina is going to have to get some. They got 3 this past class, so I mean, we didn't list all offensive line offers. I gave you a list who I thought North Carolina had the best shot at. So they're definitely wanting to sign a few offensive linemen out of 2023, and they really like Anderson.
We got 2 more we're going to hit on here before we close out this podcast. We're also going to run a podcast doing the same thing, having the same conversation about the defensive side of the ball. Shamrod Umarov, he got an offer, I think, when I was up in the D.C. area, and I actually interviewed him, I think, when I was in my hotel room.
Yeah, I'll have to defer to you because you talked to him. Interesting young man, 6'6", 285 pounds, from Denmark, Georgia. Another kid that sort of came from out of nowhere. And the live recruiting period in June, when everything opened up for the first time in 15 months, you saw a lot of dudes. You mentioned Justin Kaniak being an example, but I think this young man, as well as an example, he really likes. I mean, I think he's a very positive kid, and it was early in the process when a lot of schools started showing him some love. But he definitely liked the academic side about Carolina, the cultural side, the social side, all that kind of stuff. But 6'6", 285 pounds. He's kind of new playing football. There's sort of a blank canvas thing there that a lot of coaching staffs love. So Carolina likes this kid, and they are pursuing him. I don't know where he is on the pecking order, but if you're going to bring in, say, 4 offensive linemen in a class, I could see a kid like this being the 4th one that UNC brings in, because sometimes those are the dudes end up being one of your starters in a couple of years, because they just get better and better, and they got all the natural tools. What do you know on your end about Shamrod Umarov? Well, we know that in person is so important for all staffs, and it really is for UNC, because these kids come visit and they get to work out, and Coach Brown actually can see, because, some people may fidget a little numbers, and if he sees that these kids are definitely a 6'6", 6'7" guy or whatever, him down here and the guys up here, and it's kind of just weird, you see these guys in person. I remember, this is totally off subject, but I remember covering Miles Murphy's commitment, and him and, Peyton Page was his teammates, and I was standing there and they both saw me and they both come over to me. I'm like, hey, I got me some bodyguards, because you just don't know how big these guys are until they're right there on you. And I'm like, good gracious, I've got 2 bodyguards right here. But
hey, but let me jump in real fast. I was on the walk in the concourse of the Dean Dome a couple of weeks ago before a basketball game. I think it was the Michigan game, and all of a sudden I see this massive humanity, and it was Javaria Ritzie and Miles Murphy. And I thought, that parting the Red Sea through the concourse right there with those guys. Yeah, it's amazing how big these kids are.
But this kid, a Georgia kid, like you said, they're gonna get several linemen. So he looks like a great kid to keep monitoring and everything. We'll just have being from Georgia. There's a lot of good football teams down there and everything. So I don't even know if I can pronounce his name, but we'll be keeping up with this young fella.
Well, you're also going to keep up with Jamal Jarrett, just because Jamal hits you up a lot.
Yeah.
And you texting with him a lot. You talk to him a lot. Jamal is just, it's a lot of these kids from the triad have got personalities, and Jamal clearly has a personality. He's 6'5". He's a 3-star kid, 6'5", 302 pounds, from Grimsley High School in Greensboro, the number 24 kid nationally at his position, number 15 in NC State. I think there's a lot of upside to him, especially considering the fact that he's also a defensive lineman as well. So what's the latest with Jamal? And might as well share with everybody your thoughts about him, because you know him pretty well. And I think you enjoy that relationship and communicating with him as often as you do.
Well, there's some kids that they're just happy to just, like you said, keep you updated with everything, even if it's not even North Carolina related. Because Jamal, he's just seems like a happy kid, just a joy. It would be a joy to coach.
Yeah.
He transferred from Smith there in Greensboro to Grimsley and loves it there. And just, he talks about Travis Shaw like a big brother to him. Like you said, he plays both sides of the ball. Don't know which side of the ball that he's going to be at the next level. A lot like him on offensive side. I think that's his best shot. This staff is willing to give a kid, options and everything. So he really likes defense too. He likes making tackles. But getting back to what kind of kid Jamal is, I was sitting back at the state championship game, the 4A. I was sitting there watching Chambers and Cardinal Gibbons, and in the monsoon down there, and my phone rings, and it's pardon me, it was Jamal. Just I could tell it in his voice, even though it was a lot of crowd noise. He's like, "Miss King, Alabama just offered me," and you could just hear the pure joy in his face,
Nice.
In his voice.
Nice.
I'm sorry. So
when a kid gets an offer from Alabama, whether or not he's interested in going there, I think for a kid like Jamal,
Yeah.
a lot of these kids, it validates them big time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as a
And
three-star getting an offer, that means that Alabama, and I'm obviously Nick Saban knows what the hell he's doing. He's the greatest college football coach of all time. But some people think that coaching staffs just look at the top list, just offer the top kids. No, they look at film, they look at you, they do a lot of background work. And when you're offering when you're Alabama and you're offering a three-star kid from Greensboro, North Carolina, you've done your due diligence. And I've thought for a while that he's more like a 4-star, but that's just my opinion. I'm not an expert on evaluating these kids. Go ahead.
Well, and we've seen Alabama will probably want him to come down and them see them in person, kind of like UNC does and everything. But that's just type of kid. Every time he sees me, he's got a big smile, and just he's gonna make a staff happy wherever he goes. And I know North Carolina's really up there high with him. With the local being the local school, and his relationship with Travis and everything. But we'll have to see what goes with him, because he's always texting and just telling me every offer he gets, or who during the when teams could go to school, just telling me who's coming to their school or just stopping by. But he has he's got a very pleasant personality.
Maybe we can get him to encourage the rest of the targets to do the same thing, to make things
I can tell you, I wish I'd had a few Jamal Jarretts here lately. That's an open book.
There's time to start developing those relationships for you too, because that's part of the job. That is our discussion on the offensive side of the ball for the class of 2023 targets. Again, not all the kids they've offered, not all the kids that they will offer. This is just sort of Deana carving out this particular group at this particular time. Stay with us, because we're going to do another podcast on defense. It's going to be a different podcast. We'll upload and post a little bit later than we are running this one, but we're going to run them hopefully on the same day here as we build toward Christmas and try to load up a lot of interesting content for everybody to have over the holiday. She is Deana King, Miss King, I should say. I'm Andrew Jones. We appreciate you stopping by.